So recurrently in the context of the Gospel of Matthew chapter 13, the Lord will say something like, the kingdom of heaven is like this, and the kingdom of heaven is like that. And so a couple weeks ago, we had the parable of the sower. And last week was the parable of the weeds and the wheat, the parable of the mustard seed, the parable of the leavened bread. And this weekend, we're kind of closing off the series. And so there's like 7 in total. You can say, in a certain sense, the first 4 parables have to do with this question of where is God in the world? Where is he present? Where is his grace operative in the context of the world? And the last 3 parables have to do with the importance of choice. So once I understand where God is in the world, once I understand how his grace is operative in the context of that same world, the only thing left for me to do is to choose to go God's way, to choose to become the person he's called me to be, right? And so the focal point for this weekend, again, 3 parables. So the parable of the buried treasure, the parable of the pearl of great price, and the parable of the dragnet. So we'll walk you through that one at a time. So with all these parables, they're relatively short and simple. So parable of the buried treasure, right? So there's this guy, he's walking the face of the earth. All of a sudden he finds this treasure buried in a field. And so what does he do? He sells everything he has to acquire that field, which contains that treasure, right? So again, simple enough story. Kind of begs the question, what's the takeaway message? I want to focus on 2 things, right? So first of all, this notion of the invitation to live the reflective life. The invitation to live the reflective life as opposed to living the life of distraction. So many times we live the life of distraction. I'm distracting myself from my pain, my existential pain, my suffering, the big questions of the world by plunging myself in what? Stressful things, my work, distracting forms of recreation. A more modern way to frame it is like, living for the weekend, right? So my week is really painful, and so I just plunge myself in distracting activities over the course of the weekend and rinse and repeat. I don't want to think about my life. I don't want to live the reflective life. But the invitation here is to do precisely that, right? To recurrently ask yourself, when I make this choice or this particular decision, especially in the context of the moral life, is that consistent with what I want? So when I make this choice, does it leave me feeling happy and joyful and free and all those different things? And if not, what am I doing? And so to think it through, the invitation to live with the reflective heart is basically an invitation to live with integrity. So let's say, for example, you make a bad decision, which in retrospect, oh gosh, that was a bad thing. I shouldn't have done that. Rather than waste time simply feeling bad about it, or simply have this resolution in your heart, look, I'm not going to do that thing because my mom told me it was wrong, or because the church tells me that's wrong. To have this conviction in your heart where look, I don't want to do that thing because I recognize that it's not right. And more to the point, I recognize that when I do that thing, based on my experience, it doesn't leave me feeling happy and joyful and free, so why would I do it? So again, the invitation to live the reflective life, right? Now, the other thing, though, with regards to the parable of the buried treasure, is the invitation to die to oneself. Now, you hear that and you think, oh gosh, that doesn't sound super attractive, right? But go back to the story. So again, here's this guy walking around, wandering around. He discovers this treasure. And this is one of those situations where, we know how the parable goes. We just heard a story. But to think about it, the story could have gone a different way. So this guy discovers this treasure. He wants the treasure. He could easily have stolen the treasure. Just steal the treasure, take off, now the treasure is mine. But he has some intuition in his heart, a correct intuition, that in order to properly possess and enjoy the treasure, I need to do something in particular. I can't just steal it. I need to acquire the property. And how do I acquire the property? I sell everything I have to possess the property. So shades of the rich young man, right? Remember how the rich young man goes up to Christ? Basically, he says to him, look, I'm not happy. I want to be happy. And the Lord says, well, basically, you got to sell out. Stop building your sense of identity around your youth or your wealth or the external trappings of the world. Come follow me, right? But the idea is that in order to fully possess the Lord and everything he wants to give to us, something in us has to die. So the analogy that always comes to mind, sometimes we think to ourselves, well, gosh, all I need to do is rearrange the furniture in my house and I'll be good. Sometimes, though, you got to sell the house. And in order to kind of fully possess a new house, you got to sell your old house, right? In order to fully possess the Lord and everything he wants to give to me, something in me has to die. The old man, the old woman, the old sinful self, to become reborn in Christ the Lord. Okay. Now, the parable of the pearl of great price. Here's this merchant. He's called a merchant of fine pearls. And so you read between the lines, for many years he's developed a certain skill set. determining the value of different pearls. He's searching for something, I know not what. And therein lies the key, right? I know I'm looking for something. I know that it exists, and I know that I'll recognize it when I find it. But in the meantime, I refuse to settle. And that's very important. Certain things are situated in God's call, and a lot of things, not so much. Never give your heart to anything which is less and beneath your own kind of dignity, right? Another way to phrase this is like, do you believe it's possible to be happy? Do you believe it's possible to be happy even though right now you might not be happy? It's very important that you believe that it's possible. In the meantime, what do? You don't give your heart to that which is less. Now, here's the other thing, going back to the story. Regardless of whether we're talking about the Gospel of Matthew chapter 13, if you look at all the parables, there's always a certain point in every single parable where, if you're honest with yourself, you look at it and you're like, gosh, that doesn't make sense, or that seems unfair, or that just seems screwy, right? So when it comes to this parable, the parable of the merchant of fine pearls, where's the tension in the text? It's pretty obvious if you keep an open eye, right? So basically this guy, again, he comes upon this pearl of great price. And you would think, sell some of your pearls, maybe even most of your pearls, to acquire that one pearl. But don't sell all your pearls. Do you have a financial planner? Like, it's not going to end well, right? You want to diversify your investment. The way to resolve the tension in the text is to realize that once he acquires the pearl of great price, he's done being a merchant of fine pearls. Once he discovers a pearl of great price, he's done being a merchant of fine pearls. And all that stuff he did before, in terms of searching and developing a certain skill set in this particular field, all of it was in service of finding the pearl of great price. And once I find a pearl of great price, again, I'm done being a merchant of fine pearls. And I spend the rest of my life in contemplation, enjoying this one pearl of great price. Right? And it speaks to us of the value of contemplation. Certainly in terms of the spiritual life, there's room for all sorts of different things. Searching and striving and working and achieving and stuff. But a big part of the spiritual life we tend to overlook is this notion of contemplation. Once I discover that which is good and true and beautiful, that which is of the Lord, that which the Lord calls me to rest in, to stop, and to contemplate. Rest in that moment, taste and see that the Lord is good. Okay, last parable is the parable of the dragnet. It's called different things, but I like to call it the parable of the dragnet because it specifies what kind of net it is, right? So it's a net which is dragged through the water, and it catches every manner of fish. And then it's pulled to the shore, the fish are taken out of the net, and they're sorted out into two piles. And so the lectionary says the good pile and the bad pile. Now, a couple of things with that, right? So obviously it's an analogy for the final judgment. Everyone knows that. But beyond that, what can we see from this parable? We'll be judged based on our own merits. Everyone has their own spiritual journey, which is unique and specific to them. You know that, again, based on the story, every manner of fish is caught. Goldfish, trout, whatever the case may be. And a goldfish is not expected to be a trout and vice versa. Everyone has their own spiritual journey. God is calling you to be your unique self. And He gives you graces and blessings and gifts and talents and time and opportunity to become that person. And what that means, practically speaking, is in a certain sense, stay in your own lane. Don't compare yourself to other people, and certainly don't judge other people, because you just don't know. You don't know who exactly the Lord is calling that person to be, and you don't know what the Lord is doing in that person's hearts. Everyone's judged based on their own merits. Now, here's the other thing, though. This might sound like a contradiction. The sheer objectivity when it comes to the final judgment. And this comes through in terms of a translation issue. So in the English, again, it's like two piles, good and bad. English, what are you going to do? Right? But in the Greek, it comes through like this. There's two piles. One is beautiful, and one is rotten. Right? And so, pretty huge difference. So imagine these guys sorting out the fish. Is it beautiful? Is it rotten? It's obvious. It can't be both. It can't be in the middle. It's either beautiful or it's rotten. And it kind of pins us against the wall, right? So who we become at the end of our lives is the sum of the decisions we made over the course of that same life, right? And so at the end of the day, will my soul become beautiful or rotten? The sheer objectivity when it comes to the final judgment. Now, I know that when you hear about the final judgment, it can sound kind of scary, and part of us is kind of repulsed by that concept, right? But the positive way to look at the final judgment is that it reminds us that our decisions matter. You're the one who's called to participate in a very particular way in the work of salvation history. And so therefore, your choices matter, your existence matters, you matter. One final example, and I'll end with this. So one of my favorite movies of all time is called A Few Good Men, starring Tom Cruise, and there's Demi Moore and Jack Nicholson. I've seen it like a million times. So just to kind of sum it up, right? So it's a lawyer film. Tom Cruise and Demi Moore, they play lawyers who are on the same defense team. And they're defending these two guys who are on trial for murder. And at a certain point, Tom Cruise character is disillusioned. Like, he doesn't think they can win. He doesn't like one of the clients especially. He's discouraged by the whole thing, and he just wants to give up. So he wants to get off as a solicitor of record. And the way to do that, you can file for a motion to get off as a solicitor of record. I heard that somewhere. Anyways, so this is what he wants to do. And so he goes to Demi Moore, he kind of tells her his plan, and what she says is a really great line. So what she says is, they don't need another lawyer, they need you. They don't need another lawyer, they need you. Because what he's thinking is that, look, it doesn't matter whether I'm there or not. It doesn't matter whether or not I give up. It doesn't matter whether or not I try and fight the good fight, because someone else will take my place. It goes to this thing we talked about roughly a month ago. Take up your cross and follow me. It's not like your cross and the Lord's cross. It's the one true cross of salvation. If you refuse the invitation, the call to discipleship, that spot behind the Lord in terms of carrying his cross will forever remain vacant because it's for you and you alone. Whereas on the other hand, again, if you capture like the great beauty and majesty of the call, the Lord calls me to himself to be his friend, to share in his mission. Why not run in the direction the Lord wants you to run?